The show is made possible in part by its supporting sponsors: Blue Water Power Group of Companies, Joe's Discount Tire, and AskGuy.ca. The fun part about going to people's homes is you get to see their homes, and we're here today in the photography studio, and we're going to be talking right now with Shaun Antle. Nice to see you. After a long time, we accidentally bumped into each other, and you were flying a drone, I was flying. We were talking, and I didn't even recognize you. I was like, "Oh my God, it's Shaun!" And I got thinking after we left each other that day, boy, how many years it had been since we really bumped into each other or conversed, and so much has probably changed since then.
Yeah.
I just start every interview pretty much the same way. Let's go back as far as to the beginning as you can remember. You were born in Sarnia?
Yep, born in Sarnia. My dad's from Newfoundland.
Okay.
Mom was born in Leamington, grew up in Petrolia. I was born in 82 in the old, was it St. Joe's? That was the old hospital.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Lived all over Sarnia, a few different places. Went to public school for a bit, was homeschooled for a bit.
How did you like the difference between those two, like homeschool or going to school?
It was way different.
Which would you prefer?
Public.
Yeah?
Yeah. Because I mean, where I grew up in very church religious household.
Okay.
And so I was homeschooled in a church program. And so not that was a bad thing. It was a great upbringing, and it was a great education that I did get. But when I went from that to the public high school, because it was about grade 2 to grade 8, when you hit public high school, it was, whoa. You
weren't ready for it socially?
Yeah, well, and I mean, socially a little bit, but again, growing up with on the religious side, I mean, you're not used to the public system.
You didn't see that side?
Nope.
So it was a bit of
culture
shock,
yep.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it caught on quick, and my grades were good even through homeschool. I had a 90 average, and then I got into high school. My first year was good, and then I started to figure out what life was all about.
What happened there? Were you having some fun?
Yeah. You start to learn, right? I mean, the thing is, like, being homeschooled, I graduated grade 8, and because of where my birthday was, I graduated grade 8 when I was 12.
When's your birthday?
September 17th.
Okay.
So I started my first 2-3 weeks of high school. I was 12 years old.
Right.
And I graduated when I was 16. Even still 13 and 17, most people are 14 and 17, 18 when they get out, right? But yeah, I found out pretty quick what life was really like on the outside.
What were growing up, in the homeschool system? Did you have those young aspirations of what are you going to be when you grow up?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. My dad always used to say, you're either going to be a salesman or a preacher or an explorer. And the irony is I've been all three of those.
Right.
I was out west when Tara and I first got married, and I was executive director of a youth drop-in center.
Nice.
And then I was a youth pastor for a bit, and then got into insurance in 2009-10, and then now with photography, Tara and I have traveled all over the place. So explorer, pastor.
Yeah, well, sounds like your dad was a smart guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the two, again, the big differences. Well, I'm just trying to imagine that, like it's really one extreme to the other, I guess, right? How come? Like, what happened that you went from being homeschooled that you went to public school?
I think it was the program that I was a part of only went to grade 8.
Oh, okay.
At the time, I mean, that was back in early 90s. And I think now they've got them, where you can go all the way through high school.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But I think that was the main reason, was we only went to grade 8 with it, and then on to high school.
Right. What was it like being a pastor? Like, what was the process there to become?
So the thing is, like, I mean, you get into the whole religion side of things. I still have my belief system. I haven't been in church for quite some time. My parents don't like that.
Right.
But the thing is, the belief system is still there. And, my thing has always been, and I took it into insurance. I took it into landscaping, cooking, whatever job I've had my entire life. I've always been the give the shirt off my back,
Right.
help people get out of slumps or
Yeah.
whatever
As
life's
long as I've
dealing.
known, you've always been a pay it forward
Yeah,
guy.
yeah. And I think that, whether it was the executive director of a youth drop-in center
Mhm.
dealing with troubled youth,
Yeah.
whether it was being a youth pastor and having some church kids involved. But
Right.
my goal was always to, I didn't want to be in a church. I wanted to be out,
Yeah.
out with people, out meeting young kids, out meeting,
Connecting and
yeah,
building relationships, right? Yeah.
100%. And that's the key right there, is the connection and the building relationships,
Yeah.
is what was important to me in that. And that's mainly what we did.
Would you say you were successful at that, and did you achieve your goals as a pastor?
So when I was out there, when we first started, there was, let's say, a handful of kids in the youth group. When I left, we were closing on 30 or 40 kids, which in small town, small church, that was exponential. And,
Right.
and I think it had to do with that. I've never been a religious guy. I've never been a Bible beater. I've never been that kind of a person. It's literally, like you said, it's connecting. And
Yeah.
here's my belief system. But at the end of the day, I want to know you more. I want to love on people and love on society, and be the best person you can. Because at the end of the day, when you leave, it doesn't matter whether you're religious or not. What have you left behind?
Well, I guess I've always looked at religion without getting too deep into it, or belief systems. I like that way you put that. It's just different paths, really, to the same destination, right? Like we're trying to be at peace with ourselves and have a happy life, and let's try to be kind to each other. Moving forward, I mean, especially with the pandemic, I always have to talk about that in the interviews, because everybody was affected differently. But are we having a hard time being nice to each other these days?
I think I've seen a lot. It affected society a lot more than I think we all really realize.
Yeah, I agree.
How we handle things, the kids that were brought up. I mean, we went through it very well because, working in the insurance business, I mean, we could do everything from home.
Right.
And we did, but it was still, we got a paycheck, but it was still difficult because the kids were home and everything. And we thought, Tara and I, as we went through it, that, this isn't too bad. We're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
And then when things open back up, you start to see yourself, our kids, family members, depression, anxiety,
Right.
Even me. I mean, there 2 or 3 years ago, I started seeing a counselor, and I'm an open book about my life.
Yeah, hey, that's great. Thanks for sharing
because that's one of the things that I find we still deal with is the stigma on getting help when you need it. And
mental health is
100%. And I think the pandemic really brought to light how many people are struggling or couldn't cope with life without being around.
It brought attention to the saying "a whole new world," right? And kind of maybe similar to that shock that you had going from one side to the other. So, how many children do you have?
2.
Boy, girl.
Boy and girl.
Yeah, and how old are they?
Ethan just turned 12 in May, and Callie will be 9 in August.
Wow, you're busy.
Yep.
And so I remember always thinking, like, I'm so glad my kids are grown, because I didn't have to deal with homeschooling and making sure there was enough internet in the house, and try to do your job all at the same time. Was that organized chaos?
It was.
Or was it just chaos?
It was organized chaos. I mean, thankfully, like, we have an RV out front, and so Tara had made her office in the trailer.
Oh yeah.
And I had my office either at the kitchen table. At the time, we didn't have the studio that we've got set up here now. And we built a little cabin in the back, a little 10 by 10 cabin.
Oh yeah.
And I was in there, and the kids we actually went out and got school desks, like the old school that you and I would have had.
Right, nice.
Right, where you slide it in them with your little...
kind of set the atmosphere.
Yep. So we had one in each of the kids' rooms. We kind of laid down you're still in school, and the family still needs to operate as if it was a normal life. And
Yeah.
so we did cope well with it. But I mean, there was the internet thing with the kids, and every now and
You're
then,
taking
right?
my bandwidth.
We'd get in a situation where I'm talking to a client, Tara's talking to a client, and a
Yeah.
kid's knocking at your door
Right.
needing something.
Can't
And
talk to you right now.
yeah, so it was organized chaos, I think. But I think it really has brought to light how much we need human connection
Hmm.
in society as a
Even the
whole.
most introverted person,
Yep.
really.
And because I mean that's where I feel, if for myself, I mean I am extremely extroverted,
Yeah, me too.
right? And that was a big
I actually didn't mind it, Sean. I remember my wife being quite concerned
mm,
as social and going out doing this kind of all that stuff that I do. She was really concerned, and I found it as a bit of a break. It
hmm
was as much of a forced break as it was. It was
yeah,
still, it was like I was in my studio and I was fine, and
yeah,
because I'd already been working online for a long time, so
hmm
I didn't have that problem. But I can certainly see where you're coming
yeah,
from. It's like I just want to go over to my buddy's house, or I want to go to here or
yeah.
there, and yeah.
But I like what you said, because it really was the other side of that, the need for human connection,
Hmm.
but the need to
Disconnect.
just stop
Yeah, take a
and
breather.
take a breather. And um, Tara always says, looking back now, the amount of time that we had as a family, and you find yourself going, "Dang, did I did I take
Hi,
advantage of
wife.
that?
Nice to meet you.
Did I take advantage of that time
Yeah,
while I could have?" And I think we did a good job of it, but there's always that little bit of,
yeah,
whether it's regret or hindsight's 2020, of,
yeah,
did I really enjoy those moments? Because now that we're back, everything is fast forwarding,
yeah.
and now I've got a
Are we
12-year-old
trying to
and a
play
9-year-old.
catch up?
I think I
Yeah.
think I think if you are trying to play catch up, I mean, kids went back into school and we went back into our everyday lives.
Hmm.
And um, I was just at my first real big event at the surf and turf for
Oh, yeah, right.
the inn,
Did a good shepherd, yeah.
and it was just like, wow, I need more of this,
Right, yeah,
because that's what we always did, right?
yeah.
Was being involved in the community. And so I think there's a little bit of um, catching up. And back to your original point, I think people are also, we're trying to catch up, and we're trying to figure life with this new norm that we call, that's
Whatever
the
that
the
is.
phrase that
The new
everybody
norm, yeah.
hates and loves. But at the same time, I feel like we're just, I think people are struggling still to
Yeah,
find their way through it, but
yeah.
we'll
And
get
to
through
kind of go back originally, like, why are we having such a hard time with being nice to each other? Like,
it. Hmm.
talk about respect and kindness. And, I always say, like, we're allowed to disagree, you and I,
Hmm.
but it doesn't
Hmm.
mean we have to hate each other or beat on each
Yeah.
other. Do you think the pandemic had something to do with that?
I think, again, without going too deep into that, when you
Yeah.
look at the division that was created,
Yeah.
whether it had to do with the vaccine, whether it had to do with whatever, you really found that people, whether it was their personality, whether it was their belief system, whether it
Hmm.
was whatever, I think there was this line that kind of got drawn in the sand.
Yeah.
Um, and you really did see, I mean, whether it was elections or whether it was news, it just seemed like there was two camps
Hmm.
in everything, not just saying, related to the vaccine and all
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, but it just seemed like our world kind of went. And at the end of the day, it's like you said, I've always had that upbringing from my parents, and where I came is, I don't care if we disagree. At the end of the day, you're still human, and I'm
Right.
still human. So we can shake hands, whether it's grab a pint or go have a coffee. It
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter, because the one thing I think a lot of people did realize in the pandemic is life is really short.
Well, I always say it was the longest 2 weeks of our life because it was only supposed to be 2 weeks, right? And
two
we're here
weeks and
two
two.
weeks, right? So yeah, you're right. And did you discover too, like maybe some friends that you had pre-pandemic? Has any of that changed because of
Uh,
those opinions? Did any of it go too far and you had to go, you know what? I just don't want to be around you. I can't believe you think that
well,
way or something like that.
I'm sitting here thinking,
There's some
and there
discovery in there,
was,
right?
right? There was, and even in family,
Hmm.
I think it really brought to light a lot of people's belief system.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep saying belief system, but I mean just in how people reacted to different things. And I
Mm-hmm.
think there were some um, on both sides of that camp, right?
Yeah.
Um, I, I I was surprised and shocked at
Yeah.
a few folks
I think we
that
all
I
are.
knew, right? And on either side of it, it just, yeah, I think it's,
Did it bring out more? Did it make people more honest about their feelings? About, like, do you think? I sometimes felt like, boy, I never would have expected that from that person
yeah,
that I've known for
yeah,
30 years, and then it's like, whoa.
yeah.
Um,
I
found
think you were
people being more
forced
honest.
to really just, again, with such a different
Yeah.
situation
Were we
than
forced to choose?
you were in this scenario where it was like, choose, like
Yeah.
you have to choose,
Yeah.
are you in this camp or are you in this camp? And
Mm.
I really disliked that because I've always been a center kind of guy, whether
Yeah.
it's politics, whether it's whatever it is, I'm kind of in the center, and I just was like, God, why do
Yeah.
we have to be on either side? Like
Mm.
I believe a little bit of what you're saying, and I believe a little bit of what you're saying, and I think we can find. My dad taught me this, squirrel moment, but my dad taught me this. There is this person's thought, and there's this person's thought. There is this person's word and this person's word. Somewhere in the middle is where the truth is always going to lie.
Right.
And
You're
I've
smart,
really
smart guy,
really held
Dad.
on to that because it is, there's always no person is completely 100%
Yeah.
correct and right in
I've
their
always
belief or
said
thinking.
similarly, we'd say two sides to every coin.
Yep.
I've always said there's three sides to every coin. Your side, my side, and the truth.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
very
I
similar.
like that.
And that's um, so you mentioned both mom and dad are still in your life
Yep.
and
Yep.
around, and they're probably watching, so you might have to say nice things. But what was that? What was that like? How were they like as parents?
My parents are my rock.
Yeah.
Without my mom and dad, I don't know where I probably would have been
Yeah.
in my life. There have been moments in my life where I've made some stupid decisions, like we all have.
Right.
They've always been there.
Yeah.
When I've succeeded,
Mm-hmm.
they've been there, and you know, they weren't always perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
They
No.
did the best that they
Who
could
is
do,
right?
right? And the hope is always they did the best they could do. And the irony is it's full circle because having a chat with my son the other day and same thing come out of my mouth is I hope that you will be a little bit better than I was
Right.
as a dad or as a father or as a
Right.
person. And yeah, my parents have been my rock. And
What
I don't
did
know
they
where
do? What was their family living?
So growing up, when I was being homeschooled, we actually lived directly behind Bethel Church.
Okay.
And there used to be a house there. And mom and dad were the janitors at
Oh,
Bethel
okay.
for 21 years. And now they've branched out, and dad is pastoring a small little church in Sarnia, but he also during the day has his own landscaping business,
Oh,
cutting
nice.
grass, planting flowers, stuff like
Okay.
that. And they're living the life
Yeah,
the way they want to.
that's great. That's great. You, with moving forward now, now that we're out of the pandemic, I mean, like I say, we talked about playing catch up and other things, but a little more feels like freedom again.
Mhm.
I mean, but is the freedom just because we don't have to wear the mask, or are you appreciating life a little bit more? I guess is where I'm going.
I think you definitely appreciate life a little bit more. The scary thing of going through all that is how quickly things can be made for you, decisions that can be made for
Yeah.
you. Whatever side you're on that, it's
Yep.
still a scary thing
Yeah.
when you approach it. And I think now it's not even that it's freedom. It's just like, okay, now we're back to the way things are. We now see, you'll have some people that say COVID's behind us. Some people say COVID's still here.
Yeah.
And the way I personally look at it is it's that god awful phrase, the
Right.
new norm.
Right. I know. Right. I knew that was going to come up.
But I think it's just accepting what is, right?
Yeah.
1917, 18, the flu came around. They had to live with it. They figured a way forward, and here we are today.
Yeah.
100 years later.
Right.
COVID came,
Yeah. Well, it's in the history books now,
right?
right? The
We
kids will be
figured
learning
it
about
out,
it. Yeah.
sort of.
Did
And
we?
now
Did the? Let me ask you that then. Do you think the government did a good job?
I think uh, I think the politically correct answer is
Well, the laugh said it all already, really.
I think and I sort of take it back. I mean, I think they did the best they could with what they had,
Okay.
but I also do think, I mean, I've always said when it comes to politics, the best form of government is communism government, right? That is the best form on paper.
Right.
But then you need a human being to run it. So that's where the
Right.
problem starts,
Right. Right.
right? And so I think they did the best they could. Everybody in politics, there's always an agenda, whether that's right or wrong,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? That's the whole reason you get in is you have an agenda, and people that support that agenda got you in there. And so I think they did the best they could. I think looking back now, I think there are quite a few politicians that are like, maybe we could have done that a little bit better. Maybe we
Yeah.
could have done that. But
Well, nobody saw it coming. I
no,
don't think.
no,
Nobody. There was no book on
no,
how to run a shutdown,
no.
or should you do a shutdown?
And I mean,
all that stuff,
realistically,
right?
the only recent history that we've had was 1917,
Yeah.
1918, right?
Yeah.
And again, what was the book?
But
It was mass. That was it.
but it was so different because
Yeah.
of technology. Like that
Yeah.
book wouldn't have really helped. I don't
Nope,
think
it wouldn't have
today,
helped in
right?
today's
So,
world.
when did you get into the insurance business? You're with the co-operators,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. I'm with Co-op with Fabian Jagu, and I started with State Farm at the time, now Desjardins.
Mhm.
Got hired by them New Year's Eve 2009
Oh
is when
wow.
I got the call. Was with them for a bit, and then later 2010-ish, I hopped over to Co-op. I liked what they were about. They're cooperative, member owned, right? And it's
Right.
all about of the people for the people. And I always say when people ask me, what excited you, or what got you to choose Co-op? And remember when I was reading up on it that they had said they give 2 days off a year to corporate staff to volunteer, paid. And I was like,
Oh wow.
a company that cares about the community that much is kind of a company that I'd like to be a part of. So,
Right.
so 2010, somewhere in there, I think it was July, August, I started there. And then fast forward to 2013, June 3rd, 2013, we opened the office out here in Toronto,
Yeah.
and we just celebrated our 10th year.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you're managing, or what's your
I'm an office manager, so I manage. We have 3 locations. We have our main, which is Sarnia, Exmouth, Exmouth, and Indian,
Right.
and we have ours out here in Toronto on Hill Street, and then we've got just a little downtown office space that my colleague Julie Ward is at,
Okay.
and her and I co-manage the whole kit and caboodle, and that's it.
You're enjoying that, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, to be around that long, and they must like you if they're keeping you around that long, right?
It's been fun. It's had its ups and downs. I mean, the joke is put 100 people in a room and ask them who likes insurance.
Nobody.
My hand is not going up, and because it is sometimes a necessary evil. But where I focus my time as a designated professional financial advisor is more on working with people. I always relate to realtors, right? Realtors are selling the dream,
Mhm.
right? My job is to protect people's assets, help them build their assets, whether it's through investing or insurance, estate planning, stuff like that. And that's what I really like, because it's not just, I'm not the slick back sales guy. I'm down to earth. Family's from Newfoundland.
Right.
Grew up in the country, and it's just about meeting,
You got
connecting.
roots, right? You got roots.
Yeah.
And I think people appreciate dealing with somebody like that.
Yeah.
And
It's the connection and relationship is what it's all
Right.
about.
It really is, right? I teach part-time, and I teach my kids that. I said, listen, remember 2 words: impact and relationships.
Mm-hmm.
The impact on those relationships. And if you can build that,
Mm-hmm.
you can get people to follow you
Yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, right, and believe in what you're doing. And I know you have conviction when you talk about it. Even when we
Hmm.
ran into each other, we kind of got talking about it, and I was like, wow, he's really got conviction about what he's doing,
Yeah.
and that's a good place to be. Good for
Yeah, if
you
you
on
like
that.
what you're doing, you never work a day in your life.
Right,
That's
right.
it's
So
cliche, but it's the
so
truth.
so new clients, go ahead, reach out to him there. But your other passion, as we're sitting here in this wonderful room, I'm kind of jealous of this room. I have a room, but it's really messy.
Well,
This
don't
is
worry.
super
I cleaned
tidy.
it up before you came.
Did you? Okay, all right, all
Just
right.
before you
Oh,
came, I had
somebody's
everything
coming.
laid
I
out.
got to clean and dust and everything, right? And Terry would say, "Oh, I hope somebody would come over more
Come
often so
over
you
more
can clean
often,
up,
yeah.
right?" But photography, is it just photography or is some videography in there? What's
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, for a while, when I hit 18, 19, I went on my first missions trip
hmm
with an organization, not even a church, but an organization. And we went to England for 2 weeks.
Oh wow.
And I had only been to Toronto and Newfoundland. That's it.
Oh
Up
yeah.
until I was about 18 or 19.
Boy, just another culture shock for
Yeah, oh
you.
yeah, and I went to England and fell in love. I mean,
Yeah,
caught the bug right away. I was like, okay, where to next?
I know.
And and that was obviously that was 2001. That was the year 9/11 happened.
Mm.
And then the next year, I ended up going to Africa with the same organization for 2 months to about 7 different African countries, working with orphanages, working with
What a great opportunity
oh,
for you.
and that was you, you talk about culture shock. I
Yeah.
mean, I always tell this story because to me it's an important one. Very first day, you're assigned jobs and you work 40 hours a week. We were on a ship. There's about 330 people, give or take, on board the ship from about 43 different nations.
Oh,
You
okay.
had North Korea, South Korea together. You had people from the Middle East. You had Israeli. You had Australian. You had Canadian. Like there was from every walk of life.
Quite a mix.
Yep. And so I joined there, and my job was in the galley because I had cooked before. And
Okay.
long story short, they throw you into the mix, and so they gave me 2 bags, one both color coded, um, and you had to walk down the gangway and put one in this bin and one in that bin. And I didn't even get to the end of the gangway when about 5 or 6 grown men our age, 40s, 50s, somewhere in that range, like not young bucks,
Thanks.
and they came up, grabbed the bags out of my hand, and started fist fighting over rotten food.
Really?
Yeah, and that was like, it just hit me in the face, and I was like, oh wow. And the next 2 months of my life were, I mean, an eye-opening experience as to Western culture.
hmm
Not to belittle or downgrade anybody who is homeless or in a situation in North America, but they have it extremely good compared to someone
Yeah.
in Africa suffering. It's a whole different ballgame. Stepped off the plane 2 months later, my parents and my best friend and his parents met me, and they said, let's go for dinner. Do you want to go to your favorite restaurant, which at the time was the Mandarin? Love Chinese food.
Right.
And I looked at them. I'm like, no, like, don't we just have like a sandwich or something? And they were surprised. And I think if I remember correctly, I just broke down. I was like, I can't do that. I can't go spend $50
Felt guilty.
when I just came from where I came from.
Right.
And
Right.
again, you get over that because the other aspect of that is where we live. We're privileged. And
Great
there's
country we live
nothing
in.
wrong with that privilege. For me, I now understood the privilege, and there's not a moment in my life that I'm not grateful for the
What you
thousands
have.
of dollars of equipment I've
Right.
got. And
You've
when
got
I
a
go out for
beautiful home
dinner,
here. You got a
you know,
trailer. Like, yeah, that's
it
right.
doesn't go by without my
Remembering
brain
that. Yeah.
thinking you're privileged, and you better enjoy it, and you better take full advantage of it. And when you have the opportunity, give back.
It's funny how, Sean, we say things and we'll probably say it to our children, don't take life for granted
Hmm.
because you never know. And we say that a lot, but that really, until that kind of experience happens, that has a whole new meaning to you now that
Yep.
no, really,
Yep.
because we do take things for granted every day,
Yep.
even though we don't mean to. And that's not always a bad thing.
No,
But
no.
the appreciation level is definitely
Yeah, and you
higher
always
now
have to
because of that,
remind
right?
yourself.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I find myself, you can get caught up. When I first started in the insurance business, I mean, I was proud of my parents who were janitors. Society didn't look at janitors
Yeah.
as anything special.
Yeah.
Um, and so, when I got into insurance, I mean, I had, don't hate me, but I mean, I had the $400 pen, I had the suits, I had
Yeah.
because that's what I thought it was
Thought you
about.
had
And
to
then
do.
4 or 5 years into it, I went, who the heck are you?
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
isn't you, right? So sometimes you have to constantly come back and ground yourself and remember the experiences that you've had in life, and those of us like me who have been privileged to go to places like Africa
Yeah.
or Cuba or these third world countries and see what life could be like versus what life is.
Right.
And
Well, it just means you've grown as a
mhm,
person, and I always say you don't go through anything; you grow through
yeah,
it.
yeah,
So you've obviously grown and a little more matured about life,
exponentially, yeah,
yeah, right, right.
yeah,
And now you be able to pass that on to your children, right?
yeah.
And do you hope for them to have that kind of experience at some time in their life?
I have said to everybody I meet, if you don't have to, but I recommend everybody go for a week, not on not with a church group, or I mean, if you want to, go ahead,
No, there's lots of
go
organizations.
on an organization or go with an organization and build homes somewhere. Go do something for 1 week out of your entire life,
Mm-hmm.
because it'll change, absolutely change your
Mm-hmm.
perspective and your path forward. And thankfully, again, because I have been privileged. I mean, I don't make millions. I'm not I'm not wealthy by any means. But
I think you
my
are.
well, I'm wealthy in life experience. But
Yeah, no, that's
I
what I meant, right? Like,
yeah, my kids have already, Ethan, by the time he was 6, had been to 6 different countries. And that was the thing when we had kids. Tara and I both agreed as a couple that kids, a lot of people think kids will change your life, and they do.
yeah,
Don't get me wrong, but the way we approach it was, we're not going to let kids change our lives. We're going to let them enhance and enrich our
you just
lives,
read my mind, that word.
because a lot of times, I mean, my wife and I have been together for 20 years and married for 17, and
Awesome, congratulations.
that's a big thing in the world we live in today.
Some get to 5 and go,
Yeah. And I think the reason is that approach that we just said, when we because the kids and money, that's a lot of the times that's what
that's
things,
what brings us apart.
that's where it comes. And we just said, no, we're going to take them with us. It'll be hard, it won't be easy,
Yeah,
but it'll give them life experience, and it'll continue allowing us to live the life we want. And
yeah.
so they've already had that experience. I mean, our kids, I remember a while back, I think there was an article done on Ethan. He started one day, just came to us, he was 3 or 4,
Oh, yeah.
started drawing, like coloring, and he wanted to sell his pictures. And I'm like, oh, well, why do you want to sell them? And he's like, well, I want to take the money and I want to give it to kids who need money. And it was like,
Proud
so
dad
we
moment.
started a Facebook page for him, and he started selling them, and I don't know, he made, I want to say it was a few $100 or $1,000, and we donated it to some local organizations, to some other organizations. And that if anything, and I say this to the kids all the time, if I can teach you anything, it's to be kind and give back,
Yeah,
because my kids have a life I didn't have,
yeah.
right? I when growing up, if I wanted a chocolate bar, that wasn't in the budget,
No, okay.
right? Where now I don't have to think about getting my kid a chocolate bar,
Right.
or paying for travel baseball or dance, or taking them in the RV, or
Yeah.
going to Newfoundland next weekend,
Right.
for 2 weeks. It's My kids have already had a better life,
Yeah.
and so it's remember.
Do they appreciate it?
I think they do.
Yeah.
I think they do. I think they forget, because kids are kids,
The kids, yeah.
right?
They're
And we have
allowed
to remind them a lot. But when the rubber meets the road, I think when it really matters, they get it.
How did you and Tara meet?
We met in Canatera in 2003, and I saw her walking across the parking lot. And back in the day when Fast and the Furious came out, so I rolled with all that crew. I was the white Jeep with the underglow lights.
Were you drifting?
Oh
Yeah.
man, we did some crazy stuff.
That's
But
awesome.
one day I seen her walking across, and it sounds like a movie. But I was with my friend. Her name was Ida, And I'm sitting and I'm watching this girl. I look at her. I'm gonna marry that girl. I didn't know. I had no clue who she was. And she's like, "Oh, Tara, I know her. Let me introduce you."
Yeah.
And so she introduced us, and Tara wasn't looking for a boyfriend because she was going to college. And well, 20 years later, here we are.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And if it wasn't for her, I think that's another aspect. Well, my parents were my rock, but at that time in my life, my parents had helped me out of a specific hole I'd gotten myself into.
Right.
Um, Long story, but I've been stabbed in the face and had to get home and get out of the crowd I was mixed up with.
Yeah.
And I was starting to go down that windy path again. And lo and behold, I met Tara, and like a little puppy dog lost in love.
The right lady can do it, right?
Yep.
You know, try guilty. Got
Yeah.
that. Unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
You know, for us. So that's a great story.
So without her and my parents, I don't know where I'd be.
Yeah. Yeah. You let's talk more about the photography too. Like, you know, okay, you've traveled around and stuff, but I'm looking around here. You've got quite a lot of gear. What are you doing? Are you doing weddings, or are you doing landscape, or what's?
I love everybody who can do a wedding because I will never do a wedding.
Want to do them.
Don't call me for weddings, folks.
Yeah, yeah. Why not? What is it?
It's people are gonna hate me for this, but every photographer will say the same. It's the bridezillas.
Yeah,
And
yeah, right.
and
You don't want to get to deal with
on
that.
top of that, no offense to the ladies, because there are more that aren't like that, but it's also you get one shot. And I'm confident in my work and I'm
Yeah.
confident in what I do, but you get one shot.
Yeah,
And it's just the pressure and the stress that's in that.
right.
And if you're doing it,
What do you mean you didn't get a picture of that?
and if you're doing it, it's a full-time gig. And I don't know. I know lots of people that do weddings, but very few, far and few between, will you find a wedding photographer that's doing weddings, family sessions, wildlife, nature,
Right.
landscapes. You just it's
You've
a
got your
skill,
own niche.
right?
Yeah.
So that's just not my forte.
So
And
your landscape, your
landscape,
nature.
wildlife. I'm getting into some studio work,
Yeah.
headshots, like whether it's LinkedIn or people want a good social
Oh, nice. I'll have to remember that.
media image, right? My first client was my mother-in-law, and she needed it for something, and so I'm getting into that. I'm slowly getting into. I've done a few pets. I love
okay.
animals, so I'm getting into pets and more pets outdoors, couples, maybe some families. The other thing I would stay away from, and my wife's heating is infants.
Okay.
Because a lot of the time, right, you need to have all of the gear and be able to.
Yeah.
And I did good as a dad with the babies, but
That's as far as it goes.
yeah. So yeah, but it's mostly a little bit of portrait stuff, candids. I really want to get into candids.
Okay.
Outside, right, taking couples or families and hitting nature and just taking the shots. But my forte, what's really afforded me a window. I've been shooting for 25 years. The last 10, I started to get better gear. When Tara and I moved back here from out west, we did a 12,000-kilometer trip. Went down through Alberta, drove the coast in Oregon, and
Cool.
the PCH one down through California. And then we did Route 66 from Santa Monica all the way back to Chicago and made a stop in Grand Canyon, Bryson, Zion.
Oh, that's
So
amazing.
it was a great. So I started kind of caring a bit more about the gear that I had, and then COVID hit, and it was like, oh, I got a little bit more time on my hands. So it was either music, which I've been a musician my whole life, or photography, and I dove into the photography over the last 3 years, and even in the last 6 months, it's exploded. From being featured by Canadian Geographic this year.
Really?
4 of my top goals were to be featured by CanGeo, featured by Nat Geo, published by CanGeo, and published by Nat Geo. You get to those pinnacles in wildlife and landscape world, and
that's huge.
There's nowhere else to go. And
that's
I hit
the
the
best
bottom
resume ever.
Hit the bottom rung of that. One of those 4 was being featured by Canadian Geographic, and then that spun off. I've been featured by Canon Canada, Canon US, Sigma Canada.
Wow.
Whole bunch of other. I think it was. I can't remember if it was CTV or CBC Newfoundland. I had taken a couple of images there, and locally, the Sarnia Journal has spotted
Yep.
me quite a few times,
Yeah.
and so yeah, the resume has been building, and
That's amazing.
it's just been a lot of fun.
Why have I not heard of this before? This is so that's a boy. We could do just a whole other feature on
Hmm.
that. Congratulations on
Thank you.
that. That's
Yeah.
exciting to be able to. How do you reach your goals? Are you the I always teach SMART, right?
Hmm.
Are you the SMART guy, or do you just wake up and like what's your process for setting a goal and then the process to achieve it?
I've always been a believer of like setting a goal and writing it down.
Yeah.
Um,
Write it down.
and
I
and
say that because I tell my wife and son that all the time. They're like, I know, right? But it's true.
it is, and I think a lot of it has to do with my background in church, right?
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
without vision perish.
Mhm.
That's kind of a verse in the Bible, and not too cool Bible verses, but
Yeah,
it
no, that's
just
true.
I took that throughout my life, and whether it's at the insurance job or this, it's write it down. What do I want out of this year? Every year I write my goals, and this year one of my goals was I'm not a guy that cares about getting likes and followers, but unfortunately, in the world that we live
It's
in,
kind of a part of it.
it's kind of a thing you have to do, and in order to get to where you want to go. So my goal for Instagram was to hit 2,500 by the end of the year.
Yeah.
This time, well, not even this time, March of last year, I think I hit 300 followers, and I think I'll hit 2,000 today.
Awesome.
And so little things like that, getting featured
Yeah.
is always, I want to get featured by this person or this person. I hung my first image in my first juried gallery back in January with the Lawrence House, my second with the Gallery in the Grove. And then I was approached to do an entire solo show at the Elsie Craig Center of Arts.
Oh, wow.
And then I was also approached by Gallery in the Grove again to work with 4 other, what I consider locally pretty big names. Ogilvy, Scott
Yeah.
Clark, Mary Kilbreth. We're all
Right.
doing a joint show. Sylvia doing a joint show in January of
Okay.
2024
Where at?
at Gallery in the Grove,
Oh,
Brights
okay.
Grove.
Oh, I'll have to mark that down.
Yeah, so that's kind of been the
Because those guys too, like, well, Glenn, he's been like doing it forever, right? Like I met him, I was a teenager when I met him, and he was working for the Observer.
he's an
and
icon in our local
totally.
community.
And he's been in National Geographic like
Mhm.
umpteen times,
Yeah.
right? And Scott Clark, I always like his like Cuba shots, I think,
Oh.
of the cars.
Yeah.
And honestly, of Happy Harry,
Yep.
right? He's they're great friends,
Yeah.
and so those two right there,
Yeah.
to be able to be beside in the same room
In the
with
same
those
room.
guys, it's
I
huge.
was quite honored when
Wow.
I was asked to be with it, because I mean, you face this in photography of a few people, when we start talking about my journey in photography, and people are like, how'd you get started, blah, blah, blah. And, why didn't you do it sooner? Because my images have, even in the last 3 years, have gone from here to here. But
right.
For every photographer, I think if you ask them, it's the fear of not even failure, but the fear of rejection, right? Once you put
You'd
yourself
think as
out
a salesperson,
there,
you wouldn't have a problem with that.
you'd think, right?
Right.
and I did. I struggled for the longest time as to, am I good enough to put an image out there? And it was actually my friends. They're moving now to a different province, but they approached me, had seen a shot I did of the bridge in the winter,
Oh, yeah.
and I black and whited it and left the lamp with color. And they were like, I want that on my wall. And that was the first print I ever sold.
Wow.
And I was like, well, maybe this is something I could do.
Right.
And I started sharing it. People started liking it, and it really exploded last fall when I decided. My buddy Tim Deason Photography, he's another great guy, out of Chatham, and he had told me he was making calendars, and I'm like, oh, talk back and forth. And I'm like, well, I'm gonna give it a try.
Yeah.
Made my calendar, took the step. Tara was shaking at the knees because I got 50, and you got to buy them.
Right.
They don't give them to you for free, and so it was like $600 or $700 or $800 sitting in a pile, and it's like, am I going to sell these?
Right.
Before I even had them, they were sold. And then I had to call them and I ordered another 50. And I had to keep calling them back until they sent me another order. And I think in total I had sold 350 calendars in a matter of 2.5 weeks.
Wow.
And that's when I went, okay,
Something's going
people
on
want to see
here.
my stuff. And then I sold my biggest print. It was a 40-inch by 30-inch canvas of that moose actually over there.
Nice.
And then I've sold prints to the UK, Australia,
Wow.
US.
You're a worldwide photographer.
Wow.
No, really.
Yeah,
Like, think about that. You're worldwide.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you are. If
Yeah.
you're doing that kind of stuff.
It's been fun.
Boy, that's just exciting just to sit here and listen to you talk about that.
I love it.
It's just so amazing that I get a kick out of sometimes when I ask people, say, how you doing? And if you said to me, oh, living the dream, but you'd mean it when you say it, right?
Yeah. And so it's hard to, it's funny because everyone says that, right? You know, how you doing today?
Living the dream.
Living life,
no, I'm
you know.
living the dream. It's great.
and it really, this year, I think this year and last year are the first year where it really kind of knocked me in the face. And it was really like, you are not there, right?
Yeah.
But you are living the dream. You have a great job, beautiful wife, beautiful kids, beautiful home. I've been to 30 countries in my life.
That's great.
And a great career. And now photography has just has exploded, and I'm just having fun with it, and I'm just enjoying it. And what's crazy to me is when I put something out there, sort of like insurance, sort of like everything else in life. What I really love is obviously seeing someone purchase your piece and hang it on their wall. But what I really like is when someone sends me a DM or slips me a text and says, hey, you've inspired me to do XYZ. Or how'd you do that? I want to do that. That to me, in anything that I do in life, when I've been able to inspire someone, you can pay me all the money in the world. And that sounds cliche, but if you know me, you know I absolutely unequivocally mean it. Money comes and goes.
Yep.
I've been in the poorhouse, and I've been where I'm okay, right? And as an adult and as a young kid as well. And at the end of the day, it really does, for me, it means a lot when I can look at someone and they can look at me and say, your work has inspired me to do whatever it is.
Is it fair to say then from this conversation that you're a philosophical man?
I wouldn't say I am, but I think I am. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like I would never come out and say I think I'm philosophical, but I think I could definitely be perceived that way, and maybe I just don't know how to admit that I am.
Well, I think I consider myself pretty philosophical. I'm always saying things like write it down, or if you can't be on time, be early, that kind of stuff. But and those belief systems. Mm-hmm. Actually, I feel like we have a lot of more in common than we probably realized. Just listening to you talk here today. And boy, I know what I want to pick your brain on a few things about traveling to different countries and everything. What's next?
Well, actually, this weekend we leave for Newfoundland. Again, Dad was born and raised there. Mm-hmm. Went there every year of my life, and then I hit my teenage years. And from about 2002 until last October, I hadn't been home to Newfoundland. I consider Newfoundland my home. Yeah. We've got a family farm there. Like my dad had 15 brothers and sisters. That's a whole other conversation. I'm the 42nd.
Did you have any brothers and sisters?
I had two, a brother and a sister. But I'm the 42nd or 41st first grandchild. Wow. Just on my dad's side. And so we have land over there, and so we're heading back to Newfoundland, and part of this was a family vacation, but I read a book, my father-in-law, John Barker, gave it to me, and it's called Down Home, A Journey of Rural Canada by William DeKay. Mm-hmm. It's a hardcover book, and he basically traveled all over Canada, but not the big cities, to the rural communities. Right. And it's more of a coffee table book. with stories where, he would either bill it with people or whatever, and he'd share not these spectacular images. Some were, but it was just images of people working, people fishing, people. There's the one I was looking at again today is this wife and two kids standing at a barbed wire fence waiting for dad to come home off the
Yeah.
combine in
Right.
Saskatchewan, I think it was. And
Right.
so really, I started thinking about it. I'm like, I love Newfoundland. And like every year we have a Tibbs Eve party here, and it's the 23rd of December. Look it up. It's quite an event, and
Okay.
more than welcome to come to my place
All
for
right.
it. But I started going like, I'd really like to showcase Newfoundland. Lots of photographers there. Lots of people have taken imagery
Yeah.
there, and then I read that book, and I said, well, I kind of want to do something similar. And I have had this dream for a long, long time, of writing a book of some sort. And I do not consider myself a writer. But one of the things that's happened quite frequently is when I share my images on social media, I tend to tell the story,
Yeah.
right? Of how I got it. The story of my moose picture, right? I give the story of that. And I'm detailed, and I'm not trying to write or be this fancy writer, but here's the story.
Yeah.
And consistently people are like, man, you're a good storyteller. And it really brings me into the image. And so I've had this dream of writing a book, and I'm like, but I can't write a book. I'm a photographer. Well, let's do a coffee table book.
Right.
And tell stories of Newfoundland. And so that's the goal. I've been in contact with quite a few people there. I've got some things given to me for free, some experiences, some stays, some what have
nice.
you. And we're going to do a good portion of the island. And the goal is to put together a hardcover book with images all across the island, both wildlife, landscape, people, small business, fishermen on the coast. And so that's the next big project that I'm working on. And
can't wait to see it.
And then it's getting into the drone stuff where
that's right. Yeah.
I want to get into that and get into doing some drone work, whether it's commercial or what have you. But it's just taking the next step. And then I still got to check those three. I got to get featured now by Nat Geo,
right?
And I got to be published by CanGeo and Nat Geo.
You'll get there.
Once I get there,
it's
then
totally going to happen. It's already happened. It's just got to go through the process now. Amazing. And where can people find you? You're on Instagram?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. Basically, if you search Omi Nerves Photography, Omi Nerves is Omi Nerves. Bye, you got me drove. It's Omi Nerves Photography on Instagram. I have a page on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I don't use Twitter very often. And Mr. Ryan Giddings of High Five Design, big shout out to him. He's doing my website, and it goes live, I think, to this, not today, but this week.
Okay. All right.
And
well, you have to send that to me. We'll make sure we put it out there.
It'll be www.ominervesphotography.ca.
Perfect.
Yep.
I'm so glad. And I really feel that it's the laws of the universe.
Yep.
That we reconnected by accident.
Mm-hmm.
Was it an accident? I don't know. I feel like we'll be talking about doing some more stuff.
What's funny is I never told you this, but when I seen you that day and you talked about maybe doing an interview sometime, one of the things I've said to my wife the longest time is I'm like, locally, Dave Burrows is the guy. He does all the interviews, and I'm like, I'd love to be on his show someday.
Yeah, oh, that's awesome.
And then I don't know where we connect, and here we are.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for your time, my friend, and I'm looking forward to more conversation. Check them out. All those links we'll post down below in the comments. And I say it every time, and I will keep saying it every time. You can click the like and the love. That's nice. But click the share button. It really is the most important button to share the stories like Shaun Antle and all the other folks that I interview so we can get their story around. Let's get to know each other. But that's all the time I got for you this week. Have a great week and an even better weekend. We'll see you next time right here on the show. Bye-bye for now. You're a pro.
Awesome. Thanks, man.